Tonight, we step into a quiet room of clay, dust, and measured light. Not light as poetry, not light as a blessing only, but light as something ancient minds may have tried to count. In the early 20th century, physicists confirmed that light could press against matter, faintly, invisibly, like a hand too delicate to feel. Long before that, in the museums and tablet rooms where Sumerian records are studied, scholars from the University of Chicago, Yale, Oxford, and the British Museum examined clay fragments filled with numbers, offerings, stars, gods, and strange measures of order. And here begins the uneasy question. What happens when an ancient number appears to resemble a modern scientific value? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the room grows still around you, write where you're watching from, and your local time. Somewhere, perhaps, it is past midnight. Somewhere else, dawn is touching the window. You're not standing in a laboratory yet. You're not even standing in a library. Your mind drifts first into southern Mesopotamia, where the rivers spread their brown fingers through flat land, and the air smells of wet silt, reeds, warm animals, and smoke from cooking fires. The sky is wide enough to feel almost heavy. It presses down in pale blue by day, then opens at night into a blackness crowded with stars. Beneath that sky, clay tablets sleep in the earth. Some are no larger than a hand. Some carry accounts of barley, sheep, beer, labor, brickwork, temple lands, and shining metals. Others speak in a more dangerous register, where gods walk through the record and numbers become more than numbers. They are not written for us, which is rather rude of them, considering how curious we are. They were written for administrators, priests, scribes, and temple households, people who had no idea that thousands of years later, someone half asleep would wonder whether their marks hid the weight of light. The mainstream historical fact is simple, but powerful. Sumerian writing appears in southern Mesopotamia during the late 4th millennium BC, and early tablets from places such as Uruk preserve some of the oldest known systems of writing and accounting. Archaeologists working in major research traditions, including the University of Chicago's long study of Mesopotamian texts, have shown that these marks grew from practical needs. Grain had to be counted, workers had to be recorded, offerings had to be listed. Temples had to know what entered and what vanished, because temples were holy, yes, but also very serious warehouses. Still, practical things can become mysterious when they survive too long. A tablet does not explain itself. It waits. You can imagine the scribe's hand, though the word imagine feels too bright for this sleepy hour. Perhaps you sense it instead. A reed stylus cuts into damp clay. The marks are small, angled, deliberate. The surface gives way with a soft resistance, like pressing a fingernail into wax. Nearby, a lamp burns low. Its flame makes the clay gleam for a moment before drying dull and brown. That lamp matters. Every ancient record was made in light, daylight, lamplight, moonlight, firelight. Yet light itself almost never stays still. It falls, flickers, travels, disappears. You cannot pour it into a jar, not without cheating and calling the jar a room. You cannot weigh it on a scale, not with ordinary hands. And yet, modern science tells us that light is not nothing. It carries energy. It has momentum. It can push, softly, yes, but it can push. Here the hidden door of the story opens just a little. Some modern interpreters, usually standing far outside cautious academic rooms, have claimed that certain Sumerian numerical traditions conceal a value connected to light. They point toward large, sacred numbers, astronomical cycles, and divine measurements. They suggest that these ancient people knew something impossible, something preserved under layers of myth. A few even whisper about a precise match with modern science, as if the tablet were a fossilized equation. That is the fringe tidbit for the night. Strange enough to glow in the dark. There are writers who believe Sumerian gods were not metaphors at all, but teachers from somewhere beyond Earth, handing down advanced measures in the language of temples. It is an idea that drifts through alternative history like incense through a cracked doorway. Beautiful, troubling, and very difficult to hold. Scholars, as you might expect, do not quietly faint with admiration. They ask colder questions. Which tablet? Which line? Which number? Which translation? What does the sign actually mean in its scribal context? Is the value original or produced by later arithmetic? Is the resemblance meaningful, or only a coincidence dressed in ceremonial robes? Researchers trained at places such as Oxford, Yale, and Chicago tend to remind us that ancient numbers must first be understood inside ancient life, not dragged immediately into modern physics like a confused goat at a science fair. A fair warning. Yet even caution has its own beauty, because the mystery does not need to be proven in order to be worth exploring. Sometimes the real wonder is not that Sumerians secretly knew modern science. The real wonder is that they built a world where number, light, authority, labor, heaven, and memory could all belong to the same clay surface. In that world, counting barley was not completely separate from watching Venus. Measuring fields was not entirely separate from honoring the gods. A temple account could sit near a hymn. A star list could share the same mental universe as a ration list. Order was everywhere, or at least people hoped it was. You feel that hope as the night deepens. The tablet lies before you like a small, hardened silence. Its marks are not glowing. Of course, clay does not glow unless fire has just left it. But the idea inside it seems luminous, not bright enough to wake you, only bright enough to guide the mind along a narrow path. You notice how ancient numbers often feel heavier than ours. Modern digits float on screens, obedient and clean. Sumerian numbers were pressed into mud, dried under sun, stored in baskets, buried by collapse, and sometimes baked harder by disaster. They survived because cities burned, which is one of history's less comforting jokes. Fire destroyed roofs and saved records. Ruin became an archive. There is something almost tender in that. A city falls. A number remains. When later excavators uncovered such tablets, they were not finding a single grand revelation. They were finding fragments of daily control and cosmic imagination. The mystery of the radiant measure begins there, not with certainty, but with contact. Your fingertip hovers over signs made by a person who lived in a world of canals, cattle, reeds, dust, and gods with immense responsibilities. That person did not know the word physics. They did not know photons. They did not know solar radiation pressure. They knew that light came from the sky, that stars returned in patterns, and that numbers could make a fragile world seem less likely to collapse. Perhaps that is enough to begin. Perhaps the so-called weight of light is not a single hidden formula, but a question carried across time. How much does brightness matter? How much pressure can the unseen exert upon the seen? How long can a number sleep in clay before waking inside another age? Outside the imagined tablet room, the desert night cools. The smell of dust softens. Somewhere, sandals scrape across stone. Somewhere, a lamp coughs and steadies. You are close to the first door of the mystery now, where Sumerian records do not yet reveal everything, but they reveal the oldest habit of civilization: to count what it fears, to measure what it worships, to leave marks, even when the light moves on. Your mind drifts farther back, past the familiar names carved into schoolbooks, past kings with long beards and temples with stepped walls, into a landscape that has not yet fully learned how to remember itself. There are no empires here yet, no vast libraries, no royal boasting hammered into stone for future strangers to admire. There is only a low, wet country beneath a tremendous sky, where the two great rivers wander, divide, flood, and withdraw. The land is young in the human imagination, though the earth itself is ancient beyond comfort. Mud lies everywhere, glossy at sunrise, cracked by noon, cold under stars. Reeds grow taller than a person, whispering together when the wind moves through them. You stand there without being seen. The air is thick with insects, river damp, and the faint sweetness of date palms. In the distance, people move across the plain with baskets, nets, and wooden tools darkened by use. They are not primitive in the lazy sense of the word. That word often says more about modern arrogance than ancient life. They know seasons, water, animals, clay, hunger, childbirth, argument, repair, and the stubborn moods of soil. They know what must be done before heat rises too high. The world is practical first, yet it is never only practical. Long before southern Mesopotamia becomes crowded with city names such as Uruk, Eridu, and Lagash, communities are already learning the strange grammar of settled life. Fields must be worked together, water must be guided, food must be stored, labor must be organized, disputes must be settled before they poison the whole village. When humans settle near rivers, they do not simply build houses, they build obligations. That is one of civilization's quiet tricks. It begins as cooperation, then becomes memory. Archaeological studies from major American universities, including research traditions associated with the University of Pennsylvania and the University of Chicago, describe early southern Mesopotamia as a place where farming, irrigation, temple institutions, and craft production slowly intensified. Not overnight, not in one magnificent thunderclap. The change unfolded across generations, with each family inheriting a landscape already marked by decisions made by the dead. A ditch dug by a grandfather still carries water. A storage jar still remembers last year's grain. A clay token still stands for a sheep that is not present. These things matter because the hidden story of light and number does not emerge from empty air. It rises from people learning to trust signs. First, a mark means a thing. Then a sign means a quantity. Then a symbol means an obligation. Then, eventually, a written world forms, one scratch at a time. Before there are tablets full of complex writing, there are simpler systems of counting, sealing, and recording. Little clay tokens, impressed ceilings, and marked containers quietly prepare the mind for script. It is almost funny, in a dry, ancient way, that the road to cosmic mystery may begin with inventory management. The gods, apparently, appreciate receipts. Across the floodplain, the sun lowers. Its reflection breaks apart on irrigation water, a trembling brightness scattered between rows of plants. Someone shields their eyes. Someone ties reeds together. Someone carries a pot on one shoulder, feeling its rim dig into the skin. Life is physical here, Clay gets under fingernails. Smoke stings the throat. Wet rope smells sour. The body knows history before the mind names it. For a moment, it feels as though you are not watching the birth of civilization, but the birth of weight itself. Everything has a burden. Water must be lifted. Grain must be moved. Bricks must be shaped, dried, carried, stacked. Even social order has weight, because every promise pulls on someone. Every debt rests somewhere. Every offering must be brought by hands that could have been doing something else. And overhead, light pours freely. That contrast is striking. Earthly life is heavy, but the sky seems weightless. Sunlight spills over fields without laborers hauling it. Moonlight floods a roof without a potter firing it. Starlight arrives from distances no Sumerian scribe could measure, though the patient watching of stars would become one of Mesopotamia's great intellectual inheritances. Light appears effortless. It touches everything and asks for nothing. Or so it seems. Here, a strange thought begins to form. Ancient people may not have weighed light as modern physicists understand it, but they lived inside a world where light decided survival. It dried bricks. It ripened grain. It revealed flood marks. It burned skin. It divided waking from sleep. It made shadows by which builders judged walls and travelers judged time. Light was not decorative. It was administrative, agricultural, sacred, and dangerous. This is not modern science hidden in a reed hut. It is something older and more human. It is attention. The open scholarly debate becomes important here. Specialists still discuss how quickly early Mesopotamian settlements transformed into true cities, and how much of that change was driven by environment, trade, religion, administration, or competition. Some emphasize irrigation and economic coordination. Others stress temples as organizing centers. Some see migration and regional interaction as essential. The debate remains alive because early urban life did not leave a single clean explanation behind. It left layers of mud brick, broken pottery, tools, bones, seals, and silences. A silence can be evidence, too. It tells you where certainty ends, in that uncertainty. Fringe traditions like to wander. One quirky claim, sometimes made in alternative circles, is that Eridu, often remembered in later Mesopotamian tradition as an extremely ancient city, was founded under the guidance of beings who came from the deep waters or the stars. The old tales speak of wise figures associated with the watery abyss, bringers of crafts and knowledge. Later readers, especially the imaginative ones, have turned them into visitors, engineers, or teachers from beyond ordinary humanity. It is a seductive picture. A being rises from darkness, carrying measurement. A city learns to count because heaven has leaned down. Mainstream historians treat such stories as myth, theology, and cultural memory, not documentary reports of extraterrestrial instruction. Yet the stories remain fascinating because they express something real about civilization. Knowledge often feels as if it comes from elsewhere. A child does not invent the calendar alone. A farmer does not discover every canal technique alone. A scribe inherits signs from teachers whose teachers learned from others. Wisdom descends through time so mysteriously that later ages imagine it descending from gods. You can feel why. The first settlements of southern Mesopotamia lived with the nearness of disaster. Floodwaters could nourish or ruin. Drought could tighten around a community like a fist. Stored grain could rot. Disease could pass through crowded households. A canal badly maintained could become a sentence. In such a world, Order was not an abstract preference. It was a shelter. So people watched. They watched mud, water, cattle, clouds, reeds, stars, and each other. They watched the path of the sun across dust and wall. They watched how long a shadow stretched before evening work stopped. They watched the moon return and vanish, as if the sky itself were keeping accounts. The hidden timeline begins not with a secret machine, but with repetition. Day follows night, flood follows season, seed follows field, offering follows harvest. Human memory, once held mostly in bodies and voices, begins to lean toward objects. A sealed lump of clay can outlast a quarrel. A token can speak when the witness is absent. A mark can preserve what the mind may forget. This is where records become possible, not suddenly. Slowly. The river plain grows darker. Cooking fires appear near houses made from reeds and mud brick. The smell of fish, smoke, and damp earth moves through the village. Somewhere, an elder speaks of times older than the oldest listener. Somewhere, a child stares upward, seeing the first stars prick through the fading blue. That child does not know modern science. That child knows wonder, and perhaps wonder is the first instrument, older than the scale, older than the tablet, older than the temple archive. Before anyone can ask whether light has weight, someone must first notice that light rules the world without hands. It arrives silently. It changes everything. It leaves no footprint in the mud, yet every living thing bends toward it. The clay is still damp when the reed touches it. You feel the moment as something small, almost unimpressive. And that is how many revolutions begin. No trumpet sounds over the marshes. No priest announces that memory has changed its skin. A hand simply presses a cut reed into a flat lump of prepared earth, and a sign appears where a blank surface had been, a wedge, a mark, a decision. The room smells of wet clay, old straw, and lamp smoke. Somewhere beyond the doorway, a donkey complains with the deep seriousness only donkeys possess. Sandals scrape over packed earth. A jar is set down with a hollow thud. Inside, a scribe bends over his work, not as a mystical prophet, but as a trained worker in a world that is becoming too complex for memory alone. This is where hidden numbers begin to acquire bodies. Early writing in southern Mesopotamia develops from practical systems of accounting, and the evidence is beautifully stubborn. Excavations at Uruk uncovered thousands of early tablets bearing signs for commodities, workers, containers, animals, and measures. Scholars connected with the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute, now known as the Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures, have long studied these texts as part of the earliest known administrative writing. The tablets do not begin as literature. They begin as control. That may sound less romantic than secret astronomy, but listen carefully. Control is one of the oldest forms of imagination. To count 10 jars of oil, you must believe the symbol can stand in for the jar. To record workers, you must believe a mark can hold a human obligation. To mark grain, sheep, cloth, or beer, you must trust that a little shape in clay can represent something absent. This is a quiet leap of mind, and it is immense. The tablet becomes a second world, not the world itself, but a shadow world of signs. Your eyes adjust to the dimness. The scribe's hands are dusty at the knuckles, with clay gathered beneath the nails. He does not write in flowing lines like ink across paper. He presses, turns, presses again. The stylus leaves corners, angles, and impressions. Each sign is a tiny arrangement of pressure. A number is not simply drawn. It is forced into matter. That detail matters for the story of light, because later, when people speak about ancient numbers matching modern science, they often imagine the numbers as floating abstractions, smooth and bright as screen digits. But these numbers were not born floating. They were made by labor. They had texture. They could crack. A number might be stored in a temple basket, buried beneath debris, or forgotten under a collapsed wall. If a modern mind sees a cosmic code in them, it is peering through mud, not glass. A mainstream fact rests calmly here. Sumerian mathematics used several numerical systems, including a sexagesimal structure based around 60, which later influenced divisions of time and angles. That inheritance still touches your life whenever you read 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, or 360 degrees in a circle. Universities such as Yale and Columbia have preserved and studied Mesopotamian mathematical tablets, showing a tradition of calculation far more sophisticated than casual imagination allows. The ancient scribes could handle impressive numbers. They could divide fields, record rations, calculate areas, and organize quantities with care. They were not modern scientists, but they were not guessing in the dark either. They worked inside a disciplined numerical culture where training mattered and mistakes could be costly. If a ration list was wrong, someone might go hungry. If a land measure was wrong, someone might dispute ownership. If a temple account was wrong, the gods might not be the only offended parties. Administrators are terrifying in every age, even in linen skirts. The quirky tidbit arrives from an unexpected corner. Some early tablets are so plain that they look, at first glance, almost like shopping lists from the dawn of the world. Barley, beer, animals, workers, vessels. Yet alternative writers sometimes stare at these lists and search for veiled meanings, as if every jar might secretly be a star. Every ration, a cosmic ratio. Every large number, a hidden physics lesson. The humble account tablet becomes a treasure map, mostly because people love treasure maps more than receipts. There is humor in that, but also a warning. The scholarly debate concerns how to read the earliest signs themselves. Specialists still disagree on details of proto-cuneiform interpretation, because many signs remain uncertain, and context can be fragmentary. Some tablets are damaged. Some signs shift meaning across time. Some numerical notations depend on what is being counted, which makes interpretation trickier than a simple one-to-one conversion. A sign that seems clear in one account can become stubbornly obscure in another. Clay remembers, but not always politely. So when someone claims that a Sumerian record reveals the weight of light, the careful question is not only, is the number impressive? The question is also, how was the number obtained? Was it read directly from a specific text? Was it calculated from later traditions? Was it translated through multiple assumptions? Was the unit ancient, modern, symbolic, ritual, astronomical, or simply misunderstood? Those questions do not kill mystery. They keep it alive without letting it become a costume. In the scribe school, the day lengthens. Students repeat signs again and again. Their tablets are practice fields of memory. Some press too deeply. Some crowd their marks. Some likely make mistakes and hope no stern instructor notices. You can almost hear the dry little cough of disappointment from the older scribe. Human education has always included the sacred art of being mildly judged. Outside, sunlight sharpens the edges of walls. The city grows louder. Traders argue. Children chase each other through dust. A basket of wool passes through one doorway, while a jar of dates passes through another. The temple requires records because goods move constantly, and movement without memory becomes confusion. The tablet answers confusion with shape. This is how a hidden number can survive, whether sacred or ordinary. It survives because someone needed to fix a passing reality into durable form. A flock enters. A measure is owed. A field is counted. A star is observed. A ritual is scheduled. The sign catches the moment and pins it down, gently but firmly, like a moth beneath glass. Yet there is a difference between preserving a number and preserving its meaning. That difference is the dark space where speculation likes to breathe. A modern reader may see 60, 360, 12, 7, or some vast divine total and feel a shiver. The number seems familiar. It seems to belong to a structure still around us. It seems to glow. Perhaps it does. Perhaps not. Numbers can travel through culture without carrying every original thought inside them. They can be reused, rearranged, sanctified, misunderstood, and rediscovered. A number born in administration can later become cosmological. A number used for the moon can enter ritual. A number linked to divine order can become part of astronomy. The same sign can pass through many rooms of meaning. You sit quietly with that idea. The lamp flame leans. The scribe lifts the tablet and checks the surface. It is only clay, only marks, only an account made for a living institution in a city of mud brick and noise. Yet it also marks a turning in human history. Thought has begun to harden outside the body. Memory can now be stored, transported, sealed, archived, buried, stolen, broken, and found again. This is the strange beginning of the radiant mystery. Not a beam of light captured in a jar. Not a secret equation whispered by gods. A system of signs, pressed by human hands, learning to hold the invisible weight of absence. A thing is gone. The mark remains, and in that remaining, the ancient world becomes readable, but never entirely obedient. The temple rises slowly from the plain, not like a mountain, but like a memory learning to stand. Its walls are made of mud brick, sun-dried and pale, with edges softened by heat and time. The air around it tastes of dust, sheep fat, river damp, and the faint bitterness of burned offerings. You approach through a space where ordinary noise thins into ritual order. Voices lower. Footsteps become careful. Even the flies seem to circle with more ceremony than necessary. Inside this sacred world, brightness is never casual. Light enters through doorways, touches plastered walls, glints on vessels, and rests on the faces of statues whose eyes once held shell, limestone, lapis, or dark inlay. A divine image does not simply sit in a room. It receives light. It gathers attention. It becomes the still center of a moving household. Priests, attendants, singers, cooks, brewers, and scribes serve it daily, because the god is not treated as an idea only. The god is treated as a presence with needs. This is where measured brightness begins to feel possible, not as modern physics, not as a laboratory result, as sacred order. In the Sumerian world, gods are deeply connected to natural forces, social authority, craft, fertility, storms, waters, and celestial bodies. One of the most important divine figures linked with brilliance is the sun god, known in later Akkadian tradition as Shamash and in Sumerian contexts as Utu. He is associated with justice, visibility, judgment, and the daily journey of the sun. Scholars at institutions such as Yale and the University of Pennsylvania have studied hymns and legal traditions, showing that the sun god's power lay partly in seeing what humans tried to hide. That is a beautiful terror. Nothing stays secret under the sun. You sense why this matters. In a world without electric light, the sun is not background scenery. It is the great revealer. It shows the boundary stone. It exposes the thief. It warms the field. It punishes the traveler who misjudges the road. It gives the judge a metaphor and the farmer a calendar. It burns, blesses, measures, and witnesses. So, when records speak of divine brightness, they may also speak of social order. Light becomes a moral instrument. It does not merely shine. It evaluates. It separates the visible from the hidden, the lawful from the crooked, the known from the suspected. Ancient justice, in this sense, has a solar face. You stand near the temple threshold and feel the day outside pressing against the shade. The contrast is sharp. The courtyard is white with heat. The inner room is dark and close, smelling of oil, cedar wood, wool, and old offerings. A lamp flame trembles near a divine statue. Its light is tiny compared with the sun, but within the room it rules everything. The smallest flame can command a shadow. It can make a carved face seem to breathe. A scribe watching such things would not need modern optics to understand that light transforms reality. The same statue in darkness is one thing. The statue in lamplight is another. The god appears, withdraws, gleams, disappears. A ritual object can become alive through carefully managed brightness. The mainstream fact is steady here. Mesopotamian temples were not only places of worship, but also economic and administrative centers that managed land, labor, food, animals, and craft production. Archaeological and textual research connected to the University of Chicago and other major institutions confirms that temple households generated enormous quantities of records. The sacred and the bureaucratic were not separate rooms in the ancient mind. They shared walls. This creates the perfect climate for symbolic measurement. If a god receives offerings, the offerings are counted. If the god's festival follows the moon or sun, time is counted. If lamps burn before a statue, oil is counted. If metal shines on a ritual vessel, weight is counted. If the heavens display divine order, the sky is counted. Step by step, the divine world becomes surrounded by numbers, not because it is less holy, but because it is too important to leave unrecorded. Sacred things attract accountants. A little unfair, perhaps, but historically effective. The quirky fringe tidbit enters through the figure of divine radiance itself. Some alternative writers claim that descriptions of shining gods, luminous garments, and dazzling temples are garbled memories of advanced technology. A god's radiance becomes a powered device. A sacred lamp becomes controlled energy. A shining throne becomes machinery. The temple becomes, in their telling, not a house of worship, but a misunderstood technical station. It is a strange claim, and it lingers because ancient texts often use light with unusual intensity. Divine beings shine, weapons flash, thrones gleam, heavenly journeys blaze. The language feels technological to modern ears, especially ears raised among screens, engines, and electric cities. Yet ancient brilliance also belongs to gold, polished stone, sunrise, oil flame, polished copper, and the emotional force of worship. Sometimes a shining throne is simply a shining throne. Still, the open scholarly debate is not empty. Researchers continue to discuss how literally ancient divine descriptions should be read. and how much of their imagery reflects ritual performance, political authority, sensory experience, or inherited myth. Some scholars emphasize temple ceremony and material display. Others examine how light language creates authority in hymns and royal inscriptions. A few focus on astronomy, showing how celestial observation fed into divine imagination. No single explanation exhausts the glow. That glow keeps escaping. You feel it on the wall, where lamplight drags itself over brick and plaster. The flame's movement makes the room unstable. Shadows lengthen across baskets, bowls, and a small table of offerings. The god's eyes catch a spark and hold it. You know, of course, that it is only reflected light. But knowing this does not empty the moment. It deepens it, because reflection itself is a kind of revelation. The sun god's brightness offers one path into the question of light's weight. In a modern sense, light carries momentum, and its pressure can be measured with delicate instruments. In an ancient sense, light carries authority, truth, danger, and blessing. It has social weight before it has scientific weight. It weighs upon the guilty. It weighs upon the field. It weighs upon the traveler, the judge, the priest, the king. A number connected to such brightness would not be neutral. It would belong to a system where cosmic order, ritual sequence, and human duty overlap. If scribes counted the gods' offerings, they were counting more than provisions. They were maintaining a relationship between earth and heaven. If they timed rituals by celestial cycles, they were not simply scheduling. They were aligning human labor with perceived divine rhythm. In your ears, the echo changes into a low chant. Someone recites words slowly, while another person carries a vessel through the dim space. Oil moves inside it with a soft, thick sound. A wick waits. A flame is transferred. The room brightens slightly, and every surface answers. Clay, metal, wool, skin, stone. Nothing creates the light except the flame, but everything participates in it. That is the older wisdom hidden inside the scene. Light is not only what arrives, it is what things reveal when touched. Perhaps this is why ancient people so often imagined gods as radiant. To be divine was to make the world disclose itself. To shine was to expose form, color, path, guilt, harvest, and time. Darkness hides distinctions. Light restores them. A god who measures brightness is also a god who measures reality. The temple does not explain the modern number. It does not hand you a formula. It gives you something quieter and more unsettling. It shows a civilization where brightness already has value, direction, hierarchy, and record. It shows a people who felt that the world was readable because divine light moved through it. Outside, the sun lowers toward the river plain. Heat loosens its grip. The temple wall turns gold, then amber, then brown. For a few breaths, the bricks seem to hold the day inside them. Then the glow fades, and lamps take over from the sky. The god remains in shadow. The records remain in clay, and somewhere between them, brightness begins to feel like something counted long before it was weighed. The number waits inside a ritual, hidden in plain sight. Not hidden like treasure under a stone, but hidden the way rhythm is hidden inside footsteps. You do not notice it until you begin to listen for repetition. A bowl returns to the same place. A chant follows the same turn. A priest lifts the same vessel at the same moment of day. Oil, grain, beer, wool, incense, dates, and animals move through the sacred household according to patterns that feel older than any one person present. The temple breathes through schedule. You stand near a storeroom where the air is close and warm. Baskets line the wall. Sealed jars sit in rows, their clay stoppers marked by impressions. A scribe counts quietly, not in a theatrical whisper, but with the practiced boredom of someone who has done this too many times. His reed stylus rests against the tablet. His eyes move from object to mark, from mark to object, as if the world and the tablet are answering each other. This is where a number can become sacred without changing its shape. A measure of grain is still a measure of grain. A count of sheep is still a count of sheep. Yet when those things belong to a god, and when the god belongs to the order of heaven, the numbers begin to carry another kind of weight. They become evidence that the world has not slipped into chaos. The ration arrives. The flame is fed. The offering is recorded. The proper amount has been given. Order survives another day. Sumerian and broader Mesopotamian traditions loved certain numbers deeply, especially those tied to counting systems, calendrical habits, divine rankings, and cosmic structure. The most famous is 60, the foundation of the sexagesimal system. Research on Mesopotamian mathematics, preserved in museum collections and studied by scholars at Yale, Columbia, and the University of Chicago, confirms that base 60 allowed scribes to work with fractions, areas, volumes, and time in ways of real elegance. It was not mystical decoration. It was practical brilliance. Still, practical brilliance can gather myth around itself. 60 divides easily. It welcomes halves, thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, tenths, twelfths, 15ths, 20ths, and 30ths. For a scribe dividing land, grain, labor, or ritual offerings, that flexibility was a gift. Numbers that make life easier tend to feel wise. Give them a few centuries. Surround them with temples, stars, gods, and kings, and they may begin to look eternal. This is the strange dignity of useful things. They become holy by surviving. A quirky fringe tidbit appears in the way alternative writers sometimes treat the large Mesopotamian number systems as cosmic passwords. The number 60 becomes not only a counting base, but the residue of celestial engineering. 12 becomes a sign of hidden planets. 360 becomes a sealed code for the heavens. Some go even further and connect enormous mythic reign lengths in king lists to astronomical cycles, lost machines, or knowledge inherited from beings who measured the universe before ordinary humanity could write its own name. It is extravagant. Yes, but extravagance often begins with a real observation. Mesopotamian culture did connect number, time, and heaven with unusual force. Later, Babylonian astronomers produced mathematical schemes of great sophistication, tracking planetary appearances and lunar cycles. That later achievement casts a long shadow backward, tempting some readers to imagine that every early number conceals the same scientific precision. Temptation is not proof, but it is part of the story. You feel that temptation in the storeroom. The scribe writes another quantity. The mark looks harmless. Yet you know that a number can outlive a building, a king, and a language. It can travel into another civilization, be translated, reinterpreted, misunderstood, admired, and folded into a new system. A number born beside a basket of barley may one day appear beside a diagram of the sky. The open scholarly debate circles around this transformation. Historians and Assyriologists continue to discuss how early administrative numbers developed into later mathematical, astronomical, and theological systems. Some emphasize continuity, seeing practical accounting as the foundation for advanced calculation. Others warn that later, Babylonian astronomy should not be projected too confidently onto earlier Sumerian contexts. Still others examine how scribal schools preserved old forms while giving them new meanings. The debate remains careful because time itself is layered, and clay rarely tells us every stage of a thought. A number may be old, its interpretation may be younger. That distinction matters when people speak of a number matching modern science. Modern physics has precise constants and relationships, but ancient records do not always give us precision in the way a laboratory does. A ritual number may be exact within ritual practice, yet symbolic in cosmological storytelling. A large sacred number may express greatness, completeness, or divine hierarchy rather than measurement in a modern sense. A repeated pattern may show structure without revealing a secret equation, and yet, you should not dismiss the ancient mind too quickly. That would be its own lazy myth. Sumerian scribes worked within disciplined training. They memorized sign lists, copied models, learned measures, and participated in institutions that depended on accuracy. Their numbers shaped real food distribution, real construction, real labor, and real ritual timing. If they placed a number in a sacred context, it was not necessarily vague. It might be exact for reasons we only partly understand. The storeroom grows darker as the sun moves away from the doorway. The smell of date syrup thickens in the heat. Wax smoke curls near a shelf. A seal impression dries on a lump of clay, carrying the authority of someone not present. That is another kind of mystery. Power can leave a mark and depart. The mark still commands obedience. Numbers do this too. They are absent authority made visible. In the ritual records, the repeated amount becomes almost musical. So many measures for this day. So many vessels for that feast. So many animals, loaves, jars, or textiles assigned according to rank and occasion. Nothing here looks like a modern equation, but everything here teaches the mind to expect proportion. More for the greater God, less for the lesser office. A special amount for a special day. A repeated amount for a repeated duty. The system speaks through recurrence. Perhaps this is why hidden number claims are so persistent. Repetition invites interpretation. Once a number returns often enough, the mind begins to ask whether it is counting something larger than the obvious object. Is it a ration? Or a cycle? Is it an offering? Or a calendar? Is it a divine rank? Or an astronomical memory? Is it just a number? Or has it become a door? You stand with that question rather than forcing it open. A calm mind can let mystery breathe. The so-called weight of light, if it appears through a numerical resemblance, belongs in this delicate territory. It may be coincidence. It may be a modern pattern laid over ancient clay. It may be a symbolic value later mistaken for physics. It may also reveal something subtler, that ancient people understood light as part of an ordered cosmos and placed brightness within systems of count, ritual, and divine accountability. The temple does not need lasers to be profound. It has dawn, lamps, polished vessels, star calendars, and the daily pressure of survival. It has people who know that sunlight determines harvest and shadow determines time. It has scribes who turn experience into marks. It has priests who move through sacred routines as though the universe depends on repetition, because in a way, theirs does. Night approaches the storeroom slowly. The last glow catches a row of jars, then fades from their shoulders. A lamp is lit, smaller than the sun, but more intimate. Its light rests on the tablet, and the wet signs shine for a moment. The number is there. It does not announce itself. It waits among offerings, measures, and duties, carrying both ordinary sense and the faint possibility of something wider. Perhaps all sacred numbers begin this way, as useful quantities touched too often by reverence. Perhaps the first secret is not that the ancients knew everything, but that they counted as if everything mattered. And in that careful counting, even light begins to feel accountable. Modern science enters the room quietly, carrying instruments too delicate for ancient hands. There is no thunderclap in this arrival. No dazzling portal opens over the tablet. Instead, you hear the hum of a laboratory, the faint click of equipment, and the careful breath of someone trying not to disturb a measurement. The air smells different here, not river mud or lamp oil, but metal, glass, warm circuitry, paper, and polished floors cleaned too well for comfort. Light is no longer only sacred, it is measurable. You stand beside a table where mirrors, sensors, and calibrated surfaces wait under controlled conditions. A beam travels across the room, obedient and silent. It seems weightless, because that is how light feels to ordinary life. It crosses your face without bruising you. It rests on your hand without bending your wrist. It fills a window, slips over a book, warms a stone, and then vanishes when the sun falls or the switch clicks. And yet physics has learned to distrust appearances. The mainstream scientific fact is firm. Light carries energy and momentum, and when it strikes or reflects from matter, it can exert pressure. This pressure is known as radiation pressure. It is extremely small in everyday conditions, but it is real enough to matter in astronomy, spacecraft design, optics, and experiments involving tiny particles. Major research universities such as Stanford, Harvard, and MIT have taught this principle through modern physics, while scientific journals have explored its effects in lasers, solar sails, and the behavior of dust near stars. A beam of light can push, gently, yes, but truly. This is where the old phrase, "the weight of light," becomes both poetic and scientific. Strictly speaking, light has no rest mass in the way a stone has mass. A photon, the quantum of light, is not a little pebble flying through space. It does not sit still on a scale. Yet light has energy, and energy contributes to gravitational effects. Light has momentum, and momentum can be transferred. In a deep physical sense, light participates in the architecture of the universe. The invisible is not powerless. A modern scientist can describe this without incense, hymns, or divine names. The equations are calm, energy, momentum, pressure, speed. Light moves through vacuum at a constant speed, the famous value close to 300 million meters per second. That number is one of modern science's great thresholds. It appears in relativity, electromagnetism, astronomy, and every signal crossing the dark between worlds. You have heard it often enough that it may feel ordinary. It is not ordinary. It means that moonlight takes a little over a second to reach your eyes. Sunlight reaches Earth in about 8 minutes. Starlight may arrive after years, centuries, or thousands of years, entering your vision long after its source changed or died. The night sky is not simply above you. It is delayed. It is ancient by the time it touches you. That thought belongs beside the tablets. Not because Sumerian scribes knew the speed of light in modern units. There is no reliable scholarly basis for saying that they did. But because both worlds, the clay archive and the laboratory, meet in one human impulse. They both want to know whether what seems fleeting can be given a measure. The quirky fringe tidbit grows louder in this scientific light. Some alternative interpretations claim that Sumerian numerical systems encode values connected to the speed of light, radiation pressure, or cosmic distance. They often take a sacred or astronomical number, transform it through modern units, and declare a match. The method can feel thrilling at first, especially when the final digits seem close. It is the sort of coincidence that makes the mind sit up in bed, which is inconvenient during a bedtime documentary. But here is the gentle problem. Modern units are modern. Meters, seconds, kilograms, newtons, and joules belong to specific measurement traditions shaped long after Sumer vanished. When a proposed match depends on converting ancient symbolic numbers into modern scientific units, caution becomes essential. A number may appear impressive because the path to it has been chosen very carefully. Change the unit, the conversion, or the starting assumption, and the glow may fade. This does not make ancient knowledge small. It makes modern interpretation responsible. The open scholarly debate sits in a more serious place. Historians of science continue to discuss how we should describe ancient scientific knowledge without either belittling it or exaggerating it. Some scholars emphasize that Mesopotamian astronomy and mathematics were among the most advanced intellectual achievements of the ancient world. Others warn against projecting modern concepts backward onto cultures that organized knowledge through different categories, including omen interpretation, ritual practice, and administrative calculation. The real question is not whether ancient people were intelligent. They clearly were. The question is what kind of knowledge they were building. That distinction matters. A Sumerian scribe observing celestial regularity was not a physicist in a modern laboratory, but he was not merely daydreaming under pretty stars either. He belonged to a scribal culture that valued record, pattern, repetition, and prediction. Later, Mesopotamian scholars would track planetary behavior with remarkable care. They developed mathematical astronomy that influenced Greek traditions and, through long chains of transmission, the wider history of science. The river did not end at the city. It flowed into centuries. In the laboratory, the beam of light strikes a surface. The pressure is tiny, almost laughably small. You could place your hand in ordinary sunlight and never feel it push. Yet on a cosmic scale, the same principle becomes powerful. Radiation can shape comet tails. It can influence dust around stars. It can help propel solar sails, those beautiful thin mirrors that turn sunlight into motion. Here, light becomes a wind without air. That image would not be hard for an ancient poet to understand. A wind from the sun, a pressure from brightness, a force without a visible body. Perhaps this is why the story remains so seductive. Modern physics gives literal form to an intuition that ancient religious language often carried symbolically. Light reveals. Light orders. Light drives life. Light harms and heals. Light descends from unreachable heights and alters everything it touches. When science says that light also carries momentum, the old metaphors seem to shift slightly in their sleep. Not proven, not decoded, just strangely alive. You feel the gap between the tablet room and the laboratory. It is wide, but not empty. Across that gap move questions, numbers, and human longing. The ancient scribe presses a mark into clay. The modern physicist aligns a mirror. Both acts require trust that the world has structure. Both acts assume that hidden relations can be coaxed into visibility. The tools differ. The hunger is familiar. Still, the scientist's caution must stay with you like a cool hand on the forehead. A true scientific match requires a clear source, a stable reading, a known unit system, and an independent method. Without those, the match may be more like seeing a face in stone, meaningful to the watcher, but not necessarily carved by the mountain. This does not ruin the mood. It refines it. The mystery becomes quieter, and perhaps deeper, because the most haunting possibility is not that a Sumerian tablet secretly contains modern radiation physics. The more enduring thought is that ancient people already sensed light's authority so strongly that they placed it inside systems of measure, worship, and cosmic rule. Modern science then arrives, thousands of years later, and discovers that light truly does have pressure. It truly does carry energy. It truly does touch matter with invisible force. The metaphor was not empty. The clay room and the laboratory dim together in your mind. One holds a lamp. One holds a laser. One smells of oil and dust. One smells of metal and clean glass. Between them stretches a long human corridor filled with scribes, astronomers, priests, mathematicians, experimenters, and restless dreamers. At the far end, light is still moving. It crosses the corridor without sound, bearing no basket, leaving no footprint, asking for no permission. Yet it carries enough force to stir dust near stars and enough meaning to disturb a human heart. And so modern science does not close the ancient mystery. It gives the mystery a finer edge. The coincidence looks beautiful at first, and beauty can be dangerous. You see it almost as a small flare in the mind. An ancient number sits on one side, a modern scientific value on the other. And for a moment they seem to face each other like two lamps in a dark corridor. The resemblance feels too neat to ignore. It invites a whisper. It suggests a forgotten bridge. It makes the clay tablet seem less like an account and more like a sealed message from a civilization that knew more than it should have known. That feeling is powerful. It is also very human. You're standing now in a different kind of chamber, not a temple and not a laboratory, but a quiet inner court of interpretation. Around you are shelves, tables, notebooks, drawings, photographs, translations, and old excavation reports. Dust rests on everything with professional confidence. A lamp pools gold across a page where signs have been copied from clay. Each wedge seems patient, as if it has watched generations of readers become excited, cautious, disappointed, then excited again. This is where the mind must slow down. A mainstream historical fact belongs at the center of the room. Mesopotamian numerical texts were produced across many centuries, in different languages, genres, institutions, and purposes. Scholars at the University of Chicago, Yale, Oxford, and the University of Pennsylvania have shown that administrative tablets, lexical lists, mathematical exercises, hymns, omens, royal inscriptions, and astronomical records must be read according to their own contexts. A number in a ration list does not behave the same way as a number in a myth. A number in a school tablet does not automatically explain a number in a divine genealogy. Context is not decoration. It is the luck. The difficulty begins when a modern reader takes a number from one ancient setting, carries it into another, wraps it in modern units, then announces that the result resembles a scientific constant. The resemblance may be real as arithmetic. The question is whether it is meaningful as history. Numbers are strangely generous. Give them enough operations, enough conversions, enough symbolic allowances, and they will begin to resemble many things. That is not magic. That is mathematics being overworked. You notice how softly this happens. Nobody needs to lie loudly. A person may begin with sincere wonder. Select a number that feels important. Connect it with another ancient number. Divide by a modern value. Multiply by a sacred cycle. Then step back amazed when the answer approaches something familiar. The match may seem discovered when it has partly been built. This is the dangerous beauty of coincidence. The quirky fringe tidbit is almost irresistible. Some modern enthusiasts have argued that ancient Mesopotamian figures linked to divine reigns, celestial cycles, or sacred ranks secretly encode the speed of light, the mass-energy relationship, or other modern principles. In these readings, large numbers become compressed knowledge. Myth becomes memory. Gods become scientists in masks. Clay becomes a storage device waiting for modern eyes. It has the shape of a good story. That is precisely why caution is needed. Good stories can carry truth, but they can also carry desire wearing a crown. You may want the ancient world to contain a lost science because that thought feels less lonely. It suggests that humanity once stood closer to cosmic understanding, then forgot. It hints that history is not a climb from darkness to light, but a broken circle, a memory damaged by flood, fire, conquest, and time. That possibility has a melancholy sweetness, yet scholars ask for evidence that does not depend on sweetness. They ask whether the supposed number appears clearly in a primary text. They ask whether the reading is accepted by specialists. They ask whether the ancient unit is known. They ask whether the calculation was predicted in advance or noticed only after searching many possible patterns. They ask whether the same method produces false matches elsewhere. These questions may sound cold. They are actually protective. They protect the ancient people from becoming props in a modern fantasy. Sumerian scribes do not need to be turned into secret physicists to be extraordinary. Their achievements were already immense. They helped create writing, administrative order, mathematical habits, urban institutions, legal traditions, literary imagination, and forms of celestial observation that shaped later intellectual worlds. Making them impressive in the wrong way can hide what they truly did. The room grows cooler. A window is open, and the night air carries the scent of rain on stone. Pages shift slightly in the draft. On one table, someone has placed a modern physics text beside a copy of a cuneiform tablet. They do not look like enemies. They look like relatives who have never met, sharing a family resemblance nobody can quite explain. The open scholarly debate is more subtle than the wild claims suggest. Historians of science continue to argue over how best to describe ancient Mesopotamian knowledge. Was it science? If science means systematic observation, calculation, prediction, and record-keeping. Or should the word be used more carefully, because Mesopotamian knowledge was often bound to divination, temple authority, and omen traditions. Some researchers stress continuity with later astronomy. Others emphasize difference, warning that modern categories can flatten ancient thought. The debate remains alive because ancient knowledge is neither childish nor modern. It is its own world. That phrase matters. Its own world. You step mentally into that world and resist the urge to redecorate it with modern instruments. The scribe does not need a particle accelerator in the corner. The priest does not need to know quantum theory while lighting a lamp. The astronomer watching Venus does not need the vocabulary of photons to understand that the sky repeats with disciplined strangeness. Ancient intelligence may be most visible when allowed to remain ancient. Still, the coincidence refuses to disappear completely. It glows at the edge of thought. What if a number really does line up? What if repeated systems created values that later science recognizes from another direction? What if careful observation of cycles led to ratios whose elegance was not accidental, not a hidden equation, perhaps, but a shared structure in the world itself? This is possible in a gentler sense. The same universe surrounds every age. Ancient people and modern scientists both live under the same sun, moon, planets, seasons, shadows, and geometry. A circle has 360 degrees in modern convention, partly through ancient numerical inheritance, not because the circle changed. A day still returns. The moon still cycles. The sun still casts shadows. Human beings, watching long enough, may discover patterns that remain meaningful even after language and religion change. So the match may not prove secret knowledge. It may reveal durable order. That is a quieter wonder, but perhaps a stronger one. Coincidence is not always meaningless. Sometimes it is a sign that two minds, separated by thousands of years, have touched the same structure from different sides. Sometimes it is a reminder that the universe does not belong to modernity. It was always there, pressing its rhythms into water, shadow, harvest, bone, and thought. You look again at the tablet copy. The marks no longer seem like a code begging to be solved in one dramatic moment. They seem like traces of a world that counted because counting gave shape to uncertainty. Their numbers may be administrative, ritual, astronomical, symbolic, or all these at once. The mystery is not smaller for being complicated. It becomes more honest. A false certainty would be easier. A living question lasts longer. The light on the page shifts as the lamp burns lower. The ancient number remains where it is, neither confessing nor retreating. The modern value remains in its equation, precise and coldly beautiful. Between them lies the human mind, hungry for connection, vulnerable to illusion, yet capable of patient care. Perhaps that is the real threshold. Not whether every resemblance is a revelation, but whether wonder can survive discipline, whether mystery can remain luminous after exaggeration is set aside, whether clay can be honored without forcing it to speak in a language it never knew. The room settles into silence. The coincidence still shines, but now it shines more softly, no longer as proof, but as an invitation to listen more carefully. The sky above the river plain is not empty. It is a record waiting to be read. You stand beneath it while the heat of the day drains from the mud brick walls. The evening air smells of crushed reeds, cooling clay, animal hide, and the last smoke from cooking fires. Far away, water moves through a canal with a sound like cloth being slowly torn. Above you, the first bright point appears, then another. Then a scattered company of lights takes its place in the dark. No one has written them there, yet they return with unsettling discipline. This is where priests, scribes, and patient watchers of the heavens begin to matter deeply. They do not own telescopes. They do not know galaxies, stellar fusion, or cosmic expansion. Their instruments are simpler and more intimate. Eyes, memory, horizon markers, repeated observation, lists copied in scribal schools, a roof with a clear view, a mind trained to notice when a bright wanderer appears too early, too late, too far north, or too near the moon. That kind of attention is not primitive. It is severe. The mainstream fact is well established. Mesopotamian cultures developed long traditions of celestial observation, and later Babylonian astronomical records became some of the most detailed in the ancient world. Research preserved and analyzed by major institutions, including the British Museum, the University of Chicago, Brown University, and Oxford, shows that skywatching was connected with calendars, omens, royal decisions, and mathematical astronomy. The roots of that attention reach into older southern Mesopotamian habits of counting time through moon, season, and ritual. The sky was not decoration, it was administration overhead. A new moon could mark the month. A heliacal rising could belong to seasonal expectation. A planet's appearance could trouble a king. An eclipse could send fear through a palace, not because people were foolish, but because the sky had become part of political language. If heaven displayed disorder, earth might tremble in response. In a royal court, even the moon could become an uncomfortable memorandum. Imagine receiving bad news from Venus. Rather dramatic, but very efficient. You move through a temple roof space, where the night air rests cooler against your face. A watcher stands near the edge, looking toward the dark line of the horizon. The city below has softened into murmurs. Dogs bark, then stop. A door closes. Sandals scrape across stairs. Somewhere, a lamp is being protected from the wind by a cupped hand. Above, the stars appear indifferent, which is one of their oldest talents. The watcher is not merely admiring them, he is comparing. That comparison is the beginning of pattern. A star that rises near dawn at the same season becomes a marker. The moon's changing face becomes a measure. The path of the sun shapes work and rest. The planets, those strange wandering lights, refuse to remain fixed among the stars. Their motion invites recording, and recording invites prediction. Prediction, when successful, feels almost supernatural, but it is also paperwork. The ancient heavens produced not only awe, but documents, lists, omens, calendars, and later observational diaries formed a tradition where the sky was turned into information. The watchers could not explain celestial mechanics in modern terms, but they could build records across generations. That is a different kind of power. It does not conquer the heavens. It listens until repetition becomes usable. The quirky fringe tidbit appears whenever these ancient achievements are exaggerated into impossible precision. Some alternative writers claim that Sumerian or Mesopotamian star lore preserves advanced knowledge of distant planets, spacecraft trajectories, or cosmic engineering. They point to divine symbols, star signs, or myths of descending beings as proof that the sky watchers were remembering visitors from above. A horned crown becomes a helmet. A divine boat becomes a vehicle. A star symbol becomes a map. The transformation is imaginative. It is also risky. Mainstream historians usually read these images through religion, kingship, ritual, and symbolic cosmology. Divine stars represent status, presence, and celestial identity. Heavenly boats belong naturally to cultures that knew rivers, reeds, canals, and journeys. When a people live by water, even the sun can be imagined as traveling. The language of the earth rises into heaven because humans understand the unknown through the known. Still, you can feel why the fringe stories cling to the edges. The ancient sky is vast. The records are fragmentary. The gods are luminous. The numbers are strange. A quiet mind at midnight can easily wonder whether something has been missed. That wonder is not shameful. It simply needs a steady hand. The open scholarly debate concerns the relationship between early Mesopotamian religious astronomy and later mathematical astronomy. Some researchers argue for long continuity, seeing the later precision of Babylonian astronomers as developing from older temple and scribal practices. Others stress that earlier evidence should not be inflated beyond what the tablets actually show. There is also debate over how omen traditions shaped observation itself. Did divination encourage accurate records because the king needed warnings? Or did accurate records gradually give rise to more predictive science? The answer may not be one thing. Ancient knowledge often grows like reeds in a marsh, tangled, useful, and difficult to separate. You hear the reed beds below moving in the dark. Their whisper sounds almost like tablets being turned. The sky watcher waits. The moon has not yet risen. Without it, the stars are sharper. The Milky Way hangs like pale dust spilled across black stone. You know its modern name belongs to another tradition, but the sight itself needs no translation. It looks like a path, a river, a torn veil, or a field of ash. Every culture must decide what to do with such a sight. The Mesopotamian answer was to record, interpret, and connect. A bright star could be tied to a god. A planet could belong to a goddess. An eclipse could signal danger. A repeated cycle could organize ritual time. The sky became a manuscript written without human hands, though human hands were required to copy its effects into clay. This is where the weight of light gathers another meaning. Starlight, moonlight, and sunlight are not heavy on the skin, yet they exert pressure on civilization. They determine calendars, ceremonies, agricultural expectations, royal anxiety, and theological imagination. Their physical force may be tiny, but their cultural force is immense. A small light on the horizon can move scribes, priests, courtiers, farmers, and kings. That is a kind of weight, not laboratory weight, but historical weight. The watcher turns slightly. Perhaps he notes the absence of a planet expected near the horizon. Perhaps he marks the moon's delay. Perhaps he simply waits because waiting is the oldest scientific instrument. Around him, the night deepens, and the city breathes in sleep. The gods, if they are watching, do not interrupt. They let the sky perform its slow arithmetic. You begin to understand how a civilization trained beneath such skies might produce numbers that feel larger than daily life. Celestial cycles encourage patience. They teach that time is layered. They reveal that what disappears may return. They suggest that the universe is not random noise, but a patterned silence. When scribes carry that habit into tablets, numbers become more than totals. They become traces of rhythm. A star returns. A month begins. A ritual opens. A king worries. A scribe writes. Nothing here proves that ancient records secretly measured light's momentum. Yet it shows the deeper soil from which such a claim grows. This was a world where brightness mattered enough to be watched across generations. It mattered enough to enter administration, omen, theology, and calendar. It mattered enough to become part of how people understood power, time, and fate. The patient sky does not give up its secrets quickly. It never has. It requires cold roofs, tired eyes, repeated nights, and the humility to admit that one life is too short to see the whole pattern. So records are made. Teachers instruct students. Lists are copied. Old observations are preserved because the sky may repeat, and the past may be useful when it does. Above you, the stars continue their silent work. They shine without explaining themselves, and somewhere beneath them, a human being learns that light can be followed, numbered, feared, trusted, and remembered, even when no hand can hold it. The weight no hand could hold begins as a feeling, not a calculation. You stand in the heat of an ancient morning while sunlight spreads over brick, reed, water, and skin. It comes without footsteps. It carries no basket, wears no seal, and asks no gatekeeper to admit it. Yet everything changes under its arrival. The courtyard brightens. The shadows retreat. The damp clay begins to dry. The workers squint. The priest turns his face away for a moment, because holiness can be uncomfortable when it is also glare. Light has entered the city, and the city obeys. You feel it on your arms first, as warmth, then as command. The day has begun because brightness says so. A potter checks the drying wall of a vessel. A brickmaker studies the surface of raw bricks laid out in rows. A farmer watches the water line in a canal gleam silver, then brown, then silver again. Nobody speaks of radiation pressure. Nobody needs to. The people already live inside a world where light has consequences. This is the bridge between ancient metaphor and modern measurement. The mainstream scientific fact is precise. Light exerts pressure when it strikes matter, because electromagnetic radiation carries momentum. This pressure is tiny in ordinary sunlight, far too small for a person to feel directly, yet it becomes important in space, where there is little friction and where small forces can accumulate over time. Physicists at institutions such as MIT, Stanford, and Caltech have used this principle in discussions of solar sails, optical trapping, and the motion of particles under intense beams, so the modern answer is calm but startling. Light pushes, not like a hand, not like wind against a door, more like a thought becoming force, almost too delicate to believe. When light reflects from a surface, it transfers momentum. When it is absorbed, it leaves energy behind. A black stone grows warm. A white wall shines. A thin sail in space may slowly move, persuaded by sunlight, grain by grain, moment by moment. There is a sleepy elegance in that. No engine roars. The invisible insists. Now return to the ancient courtyard, not by memory, but by sensation. The sun has climbed higher. A row of wet bricks begins to harden. The mud has been shaped by hands, but light finishes the work. Without sunlight, the brick remains vulnerable. With sunlight, it becomes wall, room, storehouse, temple, archive. Civilization rises partly because light dries mud into architecture. That is not metaphor only. It is construction. The brickmaker knows this in his body. He judges the sky with the seriousness of someone whose labor can be ruined by weather. He touches a brick and feels whether the surface has tightened. He turns another so the heat will reach its side. Light is not an abstraction to him. It is a worker that never eats, never sleeps, and never signs for its wages. Convenient, if slightly arrogant. A quirky fringe tidbit gathers around this very idea. Some speculative writers have suggested that ancient temples were designed not merely as sacred spaces, but as collectors or regulators of solar force. They point to alignments, gleaming surfaces, ritual fires, and high platforms as evidence of lost energy technologies. A ziggurat becomes a device. A sanctuary becomes a power chamber. A polished vessel becomes an instrument. The claim is imaginative. And sometimes the architecture is asked to do more than the evidence permits. Still, the impulse behind the claim is understandable. Ancient builders really did care about light. They oriented entrances, controlled shadow, polished metals, lit lamps, and created moments when brightness could transform stone, plaster, and divine images. A shaft of sunlight entering a sacred room at the right hour could feel like an event. A statue glinting in darkness could feel alive. A high temple platform catching dawn could turn the skyline into theology. The open scholarly debate touches this carefully. Archaeologists and historians continue to discuss how ancient Mesopotamian buildings used orientation, visibility, ritual movement, and sensory experience. Some emphasize practical urban design and material constraints. Others explore how architecture shaped religious perception through height, light, access, and controlled space. There is no need to turn a temple into a machine to recognize that it managed experience with remarkable skill. The ancients understood atmosphere. They knew the power of appearing at the right moment. You step from the courtyard into shade. The shift is immediate. The air cools. The body relaxes. Dust motes float through a slanted beam, each tiny particle appearing only because light catches it. Without the beam, they would still be there, but unseen. This small scene reveals one of light's oldest powers. It does not always create things. It reveals their presence. The dust was waiting. Light gave it a stage. Modern physics would say that particles scatter light. Ancient eyes would say the beam is alive with motes. Neither response is foolish. One explains process. The other preserves wonder. Between them, you can feel the whole human history of seeing. Now consider the phrase, weight of light, with greater tenderness. If someone in the ancient world said that brightness had weight, they might mean moral weight, ritual weight, royal weight, agricultural weight, or cosmic weight. If a modern physicist says light has pressure, the meaning is narrower, testable, and mathematical. The danger comes when the two meanings are forced to become identical. The beauty comes when they are allowed to stand near each other. They are not the same. They are related by awe. A king steps into sunlight and becomes visible to his people. A judge hears a case beneath the authority of a sun god. A priest raises a polished bowl, and its flash turns every eye toward the offering. A scribe dries a tablet in the warm air, preserving a number that may survive longer than his name. All these acts are shaped by light. Though none measures photons, modern instruments do what human skin cannot. They measure the tiny push. They show that light has momentum. They help scientists manipulate microscopic objects with lasers, suspend particles, cool atoms, and imagine spacecraft moved by sunlight. The delicate pressure that no hand can hold becomes usable through mathematics and engineering. That is modern wonder. It does not need to mock ancient wonder. In the ancient city, sunlight has begun to weigh upon the day more heavily. Heat presses into the courtyards. Animals seek shade. Workers slow their pace. The smell of baked mud, sweat, sesame oil, and river silt thickens. A child presses a palm against a wall, then pulls it away quickly because the brick is hot. The child laughs because the world has bitten without teeth. Light can be gentle. It can also punish. This double nature made brightness perfect for divine language. It nourishes and burns. It reveals and blinds. It gives life and dries fields to dust. It is beautiful from a distance and merciless at noon. Any culture living under a fierce sun understands that light is not merely good. It is powerful, and power is never simple. The invisible pressure of light, in modern terms, is tiny. The historical pressure of light is enormous. It structures work, worship, architecture, agriculture, justice, time, and fear. This is why a number associated with light can feel so charged, even when the evidence remains uncertain. The theme itself belongs to deep experience. People have always known that brightness moves the world. The laboratory proves one kind of movement. The ancient city lives another. As evening approaches, the pressure softens. The walls release heat. The shadows lengthen across the ground like dark water returning. A lamp is prepared indoors, ready to replace the sun with a smaller, more obedient flame. The same light that ruled the fields will soon become a wick trembling in a bowl. You watch the transition without needing to solve it. There is no hand large enough to hold light, and no scale simple enough to weigh all that it carries. Science can measure its pressure with exquisite care. History can measure its influence in cities, rituals, calendars, and human sleep. Between those measures, the old mystery remains calm, luminous, and unfinished. Light touches the tablet. The mark grows visible. The unseen has done its work again. The tablet becomes a mirror when you stop demanding that it confess. At first, you want it to speak plainly. You want one line to open, one number to lift its head, one ancient scribe to lean across 5,000 years and say, "Yes, this is what we knew." But clay does not behave like that. Clay is stubborn. It keeps the pressure of the stylus, the angle of the hand, the accident of survival, and the silence of everything not written down. So you sit with it. The room is quiet enough to hear your own breathing. A faint smell of dust rises from shelves and old paper. Light from a shaded lamp lies across the tablet's surface, catching the wedge marks one by one. They resemble footprints in a dried riverbed, small signs of movement left by someone already gone. The tablet does not glow with alien certainty. It glows with human need. That is more unsettling. A mainstream historical fact belongs here with calm force. Most surviving Sumerian and early Mesopotamian tablets are administrative, economic, or educational rather than mystical revelations. Scholars at the University of Chicago, Yale, Oxford, and the University of Pennsylvania have spent generations cataloging, translating, and comparing these texts, showing that ancient writing developed within institutions managing labor, goods, land, worship, and memory. The archive is not a single secret book. It is a crowded room of practical survival. And yet practical survival is never spiritually empty. A ration list can reveal hierarchy. A land record can reveal power. A school exercise can reveal discipline. A hymn can reveal longing. A myth can reveal how people place themselves inside a frightening universe. Even the dullest tablet, the sort that seems to say little more than barley went here and wool went there, reflects a society that believed marks could hold reality steady. That belief is astonishing. You feel it as the lamplight shifts. The tablet's surface is rough, but its purpose is delicate. It was made to prevent forgetting. It was made because speech vanishes, memory changes, witnesses die, and arguments multiply. A written mark stands against all of that. It says, "This happened. This amount was given. This name was recorded. This duty remains." The mark becomes a small wall against chaos. That is why the clay mirrors us. Modern people also build walls against chaos. You store images, numbers, messages, accounts, passwords, documents, and maps in glowing devices thinner than a tablet but more fragile in their own strange way. You trust marks, codes, and records constantly. You live inside systems of written memory so dense that you barely notice them. The Sumerian scribe would not understand your screen, but he might understand your anxiety when records disappear. Some fears are very old. A quirky fringe tidbit slips into this mirror like a shadow. Alternative history often treats ancient tablets as if they were encrypted instruction manuals from lost masters. The gods become engineers. The myths become reports. The numbers become constants. The cities become planned stations within a forgotten planetary network. In such readings, the tablet is not a mirror of human imagination, but a window into someone else's superior design. The idea is dramatic, and drama has stamina, but the tablet resists being reduced to a prop. It contains ordinary people, not only gods. It contains workers carrying loads, scribes making lists, priests managing offerings, students copying signs, families entangled in institutions, and rulers who wanted order to look eternal. If you force every wedge mark into secret technology, you lose the very human world that made the tablet possible. The mirror fogs, then clears. The open scholarly debate concerns interpretation itself. Historians and philologists continue to ask how far we can reconstruct ancient thought from administrative records, literary fragments, lexical lists, and later copies of older traditions. Some scholars emphasize the limitations of the evidence, warning that texts survive unevenly and often reflect elite institutions. Others argue that even restricted archives can reveal deep structures of society, economy, belief, and intellectual life. The debate is delicate because the tablets are both abundant and incomplete. There are thousands of voices. Most of them are missing. That is the paradox. Mesopotamia gives us more written evidence than many ancient worlds, yet the evidence still leaves vast darkness. You hear kings more often than farmers. You hear institutions more often than children. You hear formal hymns more often than private doubts at midnight. The clay preserves what someone chose, needed, or was trained to record. It does not preserve every tear, joke, mistake, hunger, or dream. Still, traces remain. A practice tablet preserves a student's hand. A ration list preserves unequal portions. A seal impression preserves authority. A myth preserves the shape of fear. An astronomical note preserves a watcher's patience. Each piece is partial, but together they reflect the ancient mind looking for order in a world that could flood, burn, fail, and vanish. That search for order is what the modern reader recognizes. Perhaps this is why claims about the weight of light feel so compelling. They are not only about light. They are about the hope that history contains hidden coherence. They are about the possibility that nothing is random, that ancient fragments point toward modern truths, that the human story is more connected than it appears. You want the tablet to be a key because a key suggests a door, and a door suggests a room prepared for you. But some rooms are invented by longing. This does not make longing shameful. Longing is part of scholarship too, though scholars prefer to keep it well-dressed. The desire to know the past, to reconstruct a dead language, to compare signs, to publish a careful edition of a damaged tablet. All of it begins with a feeling that the lost should not remain completely lost. The difference is method. Patient longing checks itself. It asks whether the evidence will bear the weight placed upon it. There is that word again, weight. A tablet can bear only so much before it cracks. An interpretation can do the same. If a single number is asked to prove forgotten physics, divine technology, and a suppressed history of civilization, it may break under the burden. If it is allowed to show how ancient people joined number, light, ritual, and order, it can carry more truth with less strain. The mirror becomes clearer when you ask a gentler question. Not, did the Sumerians secretly know our science? But, what did light mean in a world that wrote itself into being? What did number mean when counting could feed a temple, time, a ritual, organize labor, and align human action with heaven? What did clay mean when memory needed a body? Those questions do not flatten the mystery. They deepen it. The tablet reflects a human species that keeps turning brightness into meaning. You see sunrise and make calendars. You see stars and make stories. You see shadows and make geometry. You see fire and make ceremony. You see equations and make spacecraft. Across ages, the same impulse returns in different clothing. To measure the world is not only to control it, it is to belong somewhere inside it. The lamp in the room burns lower. The tablet's signs darken, then brighten as the flame steadies. For a moment, the marks look almost alive, though they are only impressions in clay. They have no voice, yet they have summoned yours. They have no eyes, yet they have made you look back at yourself. That is the mirror's final unease. You came searching for the ancient secret of light. You found the old human hunger for pattern. You found caution, wonder, vanity, patience, and the need to leave marks against disappearance. The tablet does not answer the mystery by surrendering a formula. It answers by showing why the mystery matters. Because humans fear emptiness. Because humans trust signs. Because even in dust, they keep looking for the shape of light. A forgotten system does not return all at once. It gathers itself from fragments. You feel this as a slow arrangement, like broken pottery laid out on a table by careful hands. One piece shows a number. One piece preserves a divine name. One piece carries a list of offerings. One piece records a month, a star, a festival, a measure of grain, a title, a duty, a reign, a loss. None of them explains the whole design. Yet when they are placed near one another, a pattern begins to breathe. Not certainty, pattern. The room around you feels colder now, as if the night outside has pressed against the walls. A scholar's desk sits beneath a low lamp. Copies of tablets lie in pale stacks. Some are drawings, some are photographs, some are transliterations, turning wedge marks into readable signs for modern eyes. The work looks dry at first glance, but dryness can be deceptive. Deserts preserve bones. Archives preserve storms. This is where cycles begin to appear. A mainstream historical fact stands firmly in the dust. Mesopotamian intellectual traditions organized knowledge through lists, calendars, measures, omen series, divine genealogies, and numerical systems. Research at major institutions such as Oxford, Yale, the University of Chicago, and the University of Pennsylvania has shown how scribal culture preserved and transmitted ordered bodies of knowledge across generations. The lists were not random clutter. They were tools for training the mind. A list can be a ladder. It teaches sequence, rank, category, and relation. One god belongs above another. One sign can have many values. One month follows another. One offering belongs to one occasion. One celestial event may correspond to one warning. Ancient scribes learned the world by arranging it, because arrangement made memory possible. Without order, knowledge dissolves into noise. You look across the imagined desk and see the first layer of the hidden architecture. Number, then time, then divine hierarchy, then ritual action, then celestial observation. Each layer touches the others, not neatly, but persistently. A festival requires a date requires a calendar requires the moon, the sun, and intercalation when seasons drift. A god receives offerings according to rank. Rank can be expressed through titles, hymns, temples, and numbers. The system is not mechanical. It is ceremonial and administrative at once. That mixture feels strange to modern habits, because modern life often separates science, religion, accounting, and poetry into different rooms. Ancient Mesopotamia did not obey that architecture. A scribe could move between accounts, sign lists, incantations, royal praise, and astronomical omens within a wider scribal universe. The same training in signs and numbers could serve practical record-keeping and cosmic interpretation. The tablet world is layered like sleep. A quirky fringe tidbit enters with a rustle of excitement. Some alternative writers have tried to reconstruct a secret Sumerian cosmic system involving 12 planets, ranked gods, enormous cycles of time, and hidden numerical codes. In these schemes, divine names become astronomical labels, mythic journeys become celestial maps, and large sacred numbers become lost scientific constants. The whole ancient world is imagined as a kind of encrypted classroom, built by teachers who expected future humans to solve the puzzle. It is a magnificent image. It is also much tidier than the evidence. Real ancient systems are rarely that clean. They grow, absorb, contradict, adapt, and survive through copying. A god's character changes across city and century. A number can be practical in one context and symbolic in another. A myth may preserve old material while serving a new political or theological purpose. The system we reconstruct is not a crystal machine hidden under dust. It is more like a marsh, alive with channels, roots, mud, and reflections. That does not make it less impressive. It makes it real. The open scholarly debate rests in how much unity we should see in Mesopotamian thought. Some historians emphasize coherent patterns, especially in scribal education, ritual calendars, mathematical habits, and omen traditions. Others warn that Mesopotamia covered long periods and many local traditions, so a single unified worldview can be misleading. Some texts belong to early Sumerian contexts, while others come from later Babylonian and Assyrian periods. The debate continues because the fragments invite both connection and restraint. You stand between those impulses. Connection pulls one way, restraint pulls another. Too little connection, and the ancient world becomes a heap of disconnected facts. Too much connection, and it becomes a fantasy machine. The careful path is narrower, but more rewarding. It allows the system to emerge where the evidence supports it, while leaving spaces where darkness still belongs. The number at the center of the mystery glows faintly in this reconstructed pattern. It may be part of a counting system. It may belong to ritual recurrence. It may be a later interpretation of an older tradition. It may only resemble a modern scientific value because a modern reader arranged the pieces in a certain way. Yet the resemblance feels less isolated now. It stands inside a culture that truly cared about number, cycle, brightness, and order. That matters. Ancient people did not live in intellectual poverty. They built frameworks strong enough to manage cities, temples, labor, agriculture, ritual, and sky watching. Their systems may not match modern science, but they answered real problems with disciplined thought. They made a universe where gods had domains, months had meanings, numbers had uses, and events in heaven could matter for decisions on earth. A reed pen could serve an empire of symbols. The desk lamp flickers. You smell old paper, dust, and the faint metallic scent of ink. The tablet copies seem almost to shift as your mind connects them. Divine lists become maps of authority. Calendars become maps of time. Measures become maps of value. Star records become maps of recurrence. Myths become maps of anxiety and hope. None is complete. Yet together they create a structure large enough for a civilization to inhabit. This is perhaps what a forgotten system really is. Not a secret code, a house of meaning. Inside that house, humanity does not stand at the center as a modern individual, proud and separate. Humanity serves, watches, records, fears, eats, builds, and obeys. The universe is not designed around personal comfort. It is hierarchical, radiant, demanding, and unstable. Order must be renewed. Offerings must be delivered. Records must be kept. Calendars must be adjusted. Rituals must be performed correctly, because error might ripple farther than anyone wishes to test. You can feel the weight of that worldview. It is not loud, but it is heavy. Modern people sometimes envy ancient certainty, but that envy may be misplaced. Their order was not easy. It required constant maintenance. A canal silts up. A king dies. A moon appears at an alarming time. A harvest fails. A child falls ill. A tablet breaks. The system does not remove fear. It gives fear a language, a schedule, and a set of actions. Perhaps that is why light matters so deeply within it. Light reveals whether the canal is dry, whether the offering is pure, whether the shadow marks the hour, whether the star has appeared, whether the face of the god shines. Light is woven through every layer. It touches number, ritual, agriculture, justice, and celestial order. If later minds imagine that light had a secret weight in Sumerian records, they may be sensing this older truth through a modern dream. Brightness held the system together, not alone, but everywhere. You watch the fragments settle into their fragile arrangement. There is no final diagram. No single master tablet unfolds with a perfect explanation. Instead, there is a pattern built from thousands of small survivals. A civilization pressed its anxieties and hopes into clay, and the clay endured just enough to trouble you. The forgotten system is not fully recovered. It never will be. Yet in the partial reconstruction, something ancient becomes visible. Humans looked at a world of flood, heat, stars, labor, death, and dazzling sky, then built signs to hold it steady. They counted. They ranked. They repeated. They watched. They made calendars against drift and rituals against disorder. The lamp burns low. The pattern remains. And in that pattern, light is not merely seen. It is placed, honored, feared, and measured by every act that depends upon its return. Humanity stands beneath the luminous law with dust on its feet. That is the first thing to remember. Not kings in shining crowns. Not gods blazing in upper chambers. Not perfect diagrams of heaven resting inside the minds of priests. First, there are bodies. Tired bodies. Hungry bodies. Bodies carrying baskets. Shaping bricks. Pulling ropes. Grinding grain. Nursing children. Washing hands in canal water. And looking upward when the light changes. The ancient world is never only thought. It is muscle, breath, heat, and need. You find yourself at the edge of a field where the morning has only begun to harden. The soil is dark near the water, pale where the sun has already touched it. Men and women move through rows with slow purpose. Their tunics cling slightly from damp air. A child sits near a bundle of reeds, drawing meaningless lines in mud with a stick, accidentally practicing the oldest human art, making marks before knowing why. Above them, light governs everything. It decides when the field can be worked, when the brick dries, when the road becomes dangerous, when the temple courtyard gleams, when the moon must be watched, and when the day closes like a hand. No ordinary person needs a written theory to know this. The body learns before the school does. A mainstream historical fact fits quietly into this landscape. Sumerian society depended on organized labor, irrigation agriculture, temple and palace households, and complex systems of distribution. Studies from major centers of ancient Near Eastern research, including the University of Chicago, Yale, Oxford, and the University of Pennsylvania, show that many surviving records concern workers, rations, land, livestock, and institutional obligations. Human life appears in the archive often as service, quantity, and duty. That can feel cold. A person becomes a line, yet the line proves they were there. Someone received grain. Someone carried wool. Someone brewed beer. Someone worked for a temple whose god received songs and offerings, while the workers received measured portions. The tablet is not a warm biography, but it is not nothing. In its dry way, it preserves the pressure of ordinary life. This is where humanity's role emerges. In many Mesopotamian myths, humans exist within a universe where gods require order, service, offerings, and relief from burdens. Later traditions tell of humans fashioned to perform labor for divine beings, to maintain temples, bring food, and participate in the sustaining rhythm of the world. These stories are not modern creation science, obviously. They are theological reflections on why human work feels endless and why institutions claim sacred authority over daily effort. A gentle sarcasm is allowed here. Even in myth, someone must do the chores. You walk beside a canal where muddy water moves slowly under a film of light. The surface trembles under flies and floating straw. A worker leans on a tool, watching the flow with narrowed eyes. If the water fails, the field fails. If the field fails, the ration fails. If the ration fails, the household weakens. The chain is simple enough for any child to understand, yet fragile enough to terrify kings. Humanity lives inside chains like this. Light is one link. Water is another. Labor is another. Number binds them together. The scribe records how much land, how much seed, how many workers, how many measures, how many days. The priest frames the system through divine expectation. The ruler claims authority to maintain order. The farmer feels the result in the back, shoulders, and stomach. The luminous law is not gentle. It is beautiful, but demanding. A quirky fringe tidbit appears around the ancient idea that humans were created to serve the gods. Alternative writers sometimes transform this into a dramatic claim that humans were genetically engineered by sky beings as a labor force for mines, temples, or planetary projects. In those versions, clay creation becomes biological technology. Divine command becomes alien administration, and the human worker becomes evidence of an older intervention. It is a striking tale, mostly because it turns the ache of labor into cosmic conspiracy. The mainstream reading is quieter. Myths about human creation often reflect social reality. People worked for institutions. They depended on gods, rulers, land, and water. They experienced life as obligation before freedom. So they told stories in which obligation reached back to the beginning of the world. The myth made daily labor meaningful, or at least made it explainable. If the gods created humans to work, then work was not just suffering. It was woven into creation. That is comforting. It is also rather convenient for temples. The open scholarly debate concerns how directly myth reflects social organization. Some historians see creation stories as symbolic expressions of temple economies and labor systems. Others emphasize ritual theology, arguing that the myths describe cosmic maintenance rather than simple social control. Some focus on the literary artistry of these texts, where divine conflict, complaint, and creation dramatize human existence. The debate remains alive because myth is never only one thing. It is memory, authority, poetry, and explanation braided together. You hear that braid in the field. A song begins somewhere among workers, soft and repetitive, keeping time with movement. The words are lost to you, but the rhythm is understandable. Human beings often turn labor into sound, so the burden becomes shareable. A repeated phrase can soften a heavy task. A chant can make bodies move together. Even boredom becomes more survivable when given a pattern. The scribes do something similar with numbers. They turn burden into pattern. That may be the deepest human role beneath the luminous law. People are not only servants of gods or workers in fields. They are pattern makers. They watch the sky because the sky affects food. They count offerings because offerings maintain institutions. They record labor because labor creates surplus. They tell myths because myths make pressure bearable. They measure light's effects long before they can measure light itself. The number that seems to match modern science becomes less like a sudden secret and more like a symptom of this immense habit. Human beings keep trying to translate experience into order. Sometimes the translation becomes mathematics. Sometimes it becomes ritual. Sometimes it becomes myth. Sometimes, much later, it becomes physics. The forms differ, but the impulse persists. You look at the workers again. They are not background figures. They are the reason the system exists. Without their hands, no canal holds, no bricks rise, no temple receives offerings, no tablets are prepared, transported, stored, or accidentally preserved. The most abstract cosmic order rests finally on shoulders and palms. Even the grandest number needs someone to press it into clay. This is the human humility hidden under ancient grandeur. A god may shine, but someone trims the lamp. A city may boast, but someone hauls the mud. A calendar may align with heaven, but someone wakes before dawn to begin the work the calendar demands. The luminous law descends from the sky, yet it is enforced through daily tasks. This makes the ancient world feel both majestic and slightly unsettling. Human life is meaningful, but meaning comes with service. Order exists, but order consumes effort. Perhaps that is why the light in these records feels heavy, not because a worker feels photon pressure on his skin, though modern science says light truly carries momentum. It feels heavy because light organizes the world he cannot escape. It tells him when to rise, when to sweat, when to seek shade, when to hurry, when to fear drought, when to trust the ripening field. Brightness is not decoration. It is command disguised as beauty. The day advances. The field grows brighter. The worker's shadow shortens, then nearly disappears beneath him. In that moment, he seems pinned to the earth by noon. The sky is clear, empty, and mercilessly blue. The gods feel far away, but their order is everywhere. In the canal, the ration, the temple, the tablet, the heat. Humanity stands there, neither helpless nor free. It serves, observes, resists, jokes, sings, records, and survives. It bends under the luminous law, but it also gives that law language. Without human marks, the light would still fall. Without human thought, it would still push dust near stars. Yet without human wonder, it would not become a mystery carried across millennia. The worker lifts his tool again. The water moves. The tablet waits. And under the same bright sky, humanity continues its old task of turning pressure into meaning. Scholars gather at the edge of meaning with pencils, patience, and suspicion. Not the cruel kind of suspicion, the useful kind. The kind that keeps a damaged tablet from being turned too quickly into a prophecy, a machine manual, or a message from the stars. You find yourself in a reading room where the air is cool and still. The light is soft, controlled, almost reverent. Tables hold photographs, casts, notebooks, and copies of inscriptions. Every object seems to be waiting for a careful mind. Nothing here moves quickly. That is the first lesson. A tablet may take years to understand, and sometimes it never fully yields. One sign may be broken at the edge. Another may have several possible readings. A number may belong to a commodity, a ritual sequence, a school exercise, or a later copy of an older tradition. The scholar does not simply read the clay like a newspaper. The scholar negotiates with damage, context, grammar, comparison, and doubt. Doubt is not failure. It is a tool. A mainstream historical fact stands clearly in this quiet room. The study of Sumerian records depends on philology, archaeology, history, museum conservation, and comparative work across thousands of tablets. Major institutions such as Oxford, Yale, the University of Chicago, the University of Pennsylvania, and the British Museum have helped preserve, publish, and interpret cuneiform collections. Their work shows that Sumerian texts belong to living institutions of administration, worship, education, law, literature, and political power. That range matters because no single theory can swallow it whole. The records are too varied. A temple account behaves differently from a hymn. A mathematical exercise behaves differently from a myth. A royal inscription behaves differently from a school list. The first danger is to flatten them into one secret message. The second danger is to make them so ordinary that their strangeness disappears. Good scholarship walks between those dangers. It walks slowly. You hear the soft scratch of a pencil. Someone has copied a sign 3 ways, then paused. Another scholar compares a damaged line with a similar text from another site. A third person examines whether a number belongs to an older tradition or to the hand of a later scribe. The work is not glamorous in the cinematic sense. Nobody is running through a collapsing temple with a golden tablet under one arm, which is disappointing, but probably better for the tablet. The quirky fringe tidbit enters the room wearing brighter clothes. Some popular writers claim that academic caution is not caution at all, but concealment. They suggest that museums, universities, or governments have hidden the real meaning of Sumerian tablets because the truth would disturb established history. In this version, the weight of light is not a debated interpretation. It is suppressed knowledge, locked away by gatekeepers afraid of an ancient revelation. The idea is dramatic. It also misunderstands scholars rather badly. Most specialists would be delighted to find a clear, verifiable, revolutionary text. Academic life rewards. Careful discoveries, new readings, better joins, stronger interpretations, and evidence that changes the field. The problem is not that scholars hate wonder. The problem is that they have seen how easily wonder can be manufactured by poor translation, selective quotation, modern units, and a generous amount of imagination added when no one is looking. A little imagination is a candle. Too much becomes fog. The open scholarly debate here is genuine and fascinating. Researchers continue to discuss how ancient Mesopotamian knowledge should be classified. Was it religion, science, administration, literature, or something that resists modern categories? Some scholars argue that omen texts and astronomical observations show systematic inquiry, even when embedded in divination. Others insist that calling it science can mislead, because ancient aims and assumptions differed from modern experimental method. The debate is not about intelligence. It is about categories. Modern labels can be clumsy. They arrive late and act important. You turn toward a glass case where a small tablet rests under gentle light. Its surface is cracked, but the signs remain legible enough to trouble the present. A museum label gives a date, a place, a description, and sometimes a cautious translation. The label seems modest, almost dull. Yet behind those few lines are excavations, catalogs, photographs, dictionaries, debates, broken joins, revised readings, and human lives spent learning how ancient marks behave. That modesty is earned. Fringe interpretation often dislikes modest labels because modesty feels like concealment. But the past is often modest because evidence is modest. A broken line cannot honestly become a full paragraph. An uncertain sign cannot safely become an entire theory. A number without context cannot carry a civilization's hidden physics on its back. Clay has limits, so do we. And yet, the scholars are not standing on one side while dreamers stand on the other. The boundary is more porous than that. Every scholar begins with curiosity. Every field has moments when a strange possibility must be considered. Every translation involves judgment. Every reconstruction requires imagination disciplined by evidence. The difference lies not in whether one wonders, but in whether wonder is willing to be corrected. This is where the tablet tests character. If the number matches modern science, the claim must survive hard questions. Which tablet preserves it? What is the accepted reading? Is the sign damaged? Does the number occur in a mathematical, ritual, administrative, or mythic setting? Are the units ancient or modern? Was the match predicted before the calculation, or found after many attempts? Can another specialist repeat the reasoning without special pleading? These questions are not enemies of mystery. They are the doorway through which a real mystery must pass. The room grows dimmer outside the reading lamps. Rain touches the window with small, patient sounds. The tablet under glass does not care who is right. It only remains. That indifference is strangely calming. Human beings argue over meaning, but the clay keeps its own silence. It does not flatter the cautious. It does not reward the wild. It simply holds the marks impressed into it by someone whose world is gone. Perhaps this is why the debate feels almost sacred. Not sacred because every tablet hides a divine secret, but because interpretation is an act of responsibility toward the dead. To read badly is to make them speak falsely. To read carefully is to admit that they may not answer your favorite question. That admission can be painful, especially when the favorite question glows beautifully. But careful reading has its own glow. It reveals real ancient intelligence, not an invented one. It reveals scribes who could manage complex measures. It reveals institutions that could organize labor and offerings. It reveals sky watchers who preserved patterns across generations. It reveals poets who imagined divine radiance with emotional force. It reveals a civilization that made number, light, duty, and memory part of a shared world. That is already astonishing. No secret suppression is required. Still, the edge of meaning remains. There are damaged tablets not yet fully understood. There are signs whose readings remain debated. There are old classifications that may change when a new fragment is joined. There are numerical patterns that deserve careful study, especially when they appear in ritual or astronomical contexts. Scholarship does not close the door. It asks you to enter without knocking down the wall. You feel that restraint settle over the room like dust. A scholar closes a notebook. Another turns off a lamp. The tablet in the case darkens slightly as the light shifts. For a breath, the wedge marks seem deeper, like tiny valleys at sunset. They are not giving up their final meaning tonight. Perhaps they never will, and perhaps that is proper. The ancient record does not belong entirely to belief or disbelief. It belongs to the patient space between them, where a human mind can be both enchanted and careful. The weight of light remains there, balanced between physics, metaphor, ritual, coincidence, and longing. No verdict lands heavily. Only the question remains, resting softly on clay. The number that keeps glowing does not blaze. It endures. You find it not as a flame, but as a faint persistence inside the mind, like the last brightness left behind when your eyes close. A tablet rests in shadow. A modern equation rests on paper. A ritual amount. A celestial cycle. A sacred ranking. A physical value. All of them seem to drift near one another without quite touching. The room is silent. And still the question remains, what is truly matched? A number can resemble another number, and the resemblance can feel like a door. Yet a door is not always an entrance. Sometimes it is only a shape painted on a wall. Sometimes it opens into a storeroom, not a secret chamber. Sometimes it opens only because the viewer has arrived with hope in both hands. That does not make the hope foolish. It simply makes it human. The clay does not mock the hope. It also does not confirm it. A mainstream historical fact steadies the scene. Sumerian and broader Mesopotamian records preserve some of humanity's earliest written engagements with accounting, divine service, timekeeping, mathematics, and celestial order. Research from leading institutions such as Yale, Oxford, the University of Chicago, the University of Pennsylvania, and the British Museum continues to show that these records were products of disciplined scribal cultures. They were practical, sacred, political, literary, and intellectual at once. That mixture is enough to haunt the night, because the old scribes lived in a world where number was never only arithmetic. It could feed a worker, honor a god, divide a field, time a festival, warn a king, or hold a memory against oblivion. Light, likewise, was never only brightness. It dried bricks, ripened grain, revealed guilt, shaped shadows, marked seasons, and gave the gods their visible authority. When number and light meet in such a world, the meeting naturally feels charged. You stand at that meeting place now. The air smells of dust, lamp oil, and cooled stone. Outside, night has settled over the river plain. The canals lie black beneath the stars. Mud brick walls hold the day's last warmth, slowly releasing it into darkness. Somewhere, a late footstep crosses a courtyard. Somewhere, a wick bends and recovers. The ancient city seems asleep, but its records are not sleeping. They are waiting. The quirky fringe tidbit appears one last time, softer than before. Some dreamers still say that the old tablets hide a science older than modern science, a radiant inheritance from beings who came before ordinary history. They imagine priests guarding numerical secrets, scribes copying cosmic constants, and gods teaching humanity how light moves through the universe. The story has a dark velvet beauty. It is easy to see why people carry it. But beauty is not proof, and proof is not the only path to meaning. The open scholarly debate remains open because ancient knowledge resists easy containment. Some researchers emphasize the extraordinary sophistication of Mesopotamian mathematics and astronomy, especially in later Babylonian traditions. Others urge restraint when applying those achievements backward, or interpreting mythic numbers as scientific values. Some ask how ritual, administration, and observation shaped one another. Others ask how much was inherited, transformed, or reinvented across centuries. The debate is not a failure to conclude. It is a sign that the past is still alive enough to argue with. That is a quiet gift. You look again at the glowing number. Whatever form it has taken in the modern imagination, perhaps it is a coincidence shaped by conversion. Perhaps it is a symbolic measure mistaken for a physical one. Perhaps it belongs to a ritual system whose internal logic is still only partly understood. Perhaps it is a reminder that the universe offers patterns to anyone patient enough to watch, whether that watcher stands on a temple roof or in a laboratory. Perhaps the resemblance is not a message. Perhaps it is a mirror. It reflects the ancient scribe, pressing order into clay. It reflects the modern scientist, measuring pressure in light. It reflects the storyteller, drawn toward the shadow between them. It reflects you, listening in the dark, feeling that history is not merely a chain of facts, but a landscape of unfinished meanings. That is why the number keeps glowing, not because it has solved everything, but because it has refused to become entirely dull. It sits at the edge of fact and imagination, where many old questions live. How much did ancient people know? How much have we lost? How often do modern minds mistake longing for evidence? How often do cautious minds mistake mystery for error? The answer shifts with every tablet, every translation, every new fragment, every clearer photograph, every humbler reading. The past is not still. It changes when we learn to ask better questions. A final image rises gently. A scribe lifts a damp tablet toward the lamplight. The signs shine briefly, their edges wet and clean. He is not writing for you. He is recording a duty, a measure, a ritual, a quantity required by a world that must be kept in balance. He sets the tablet aside. It dries. Years pass. The city changes. Generations vanish. Roofs collapse. Fires burn. Earth covers the archive. Silence gathers. Then hands uncover it. Eyes study it. A question wakes. In the modern world, light still travels. It crosses the rooms where tablets are stored. It enters the laboratories where instruments register delicate pressure. It falls on museum glass, research desks, bedroom walls, and the quiet face of a listener near sleep. It has no voice, yet it keeps revealing things. It shows the mark. It shows the crack. It shows the gap where certainty should have been. The gap matters. Inside it, wonder survives without needing to shout. The Sumerian records do not have to contain a hidden physics textbook to remain profound. They show something older than any single claim. They show humanity learning that the world can be counted, that time can be tracked, that brightness can be honored, that memory can be stored, and that even the smallest mark may trouble ages not yet born. So the truth about the weight of light remains double. Science tells you that light carries momentum and exerts pressure. History tells you that light carries authority, memory, hunger, work, justice, and awe. The first can be measured by instruments. The second can be felt across civilizations. Between them rests the clay tablet, fragile and stubborn, refusing both dismissal and fantasy. The night deepens. The number glows softly, and perhaps, in the end, the story is not that ancient scribes solved modern science in secret. Perhaps the story is that modern science has finally measured one small part of what ancient people already sensed in their bones. Light is not nothing. It arrives without weight in the hand, yet leaves weight everywhere it touches. Now let the room grow quieter. Let the tablet settle back into shadow. no longer forced to answer every question. Let the desert night cool the walls and soften the river air. Let the stars remain distant, patient, and unnamed for a while. You do not need to solve the old number tonight. You only need to let it rest in the dim place where history becomes dream. The lamp is lower now. The flame bends once, then steadies. The clay no longer shines, but the thought of it remains. Somewhere beyond the walls, water moves through the canals with a slow and ancient sound. Somewhere above, light from stars travels across distances no scribe could hold, no king could command, and no temple could store. Your breathing slows with the darkness. The old city fades into softer shapes. The storerooms close. The roof watchers lower their eyes. The scribes put away their reeds. The fields lie quiet beneath the sky. No final answer comes walking through the doorway. No hidden master speaks from the clay. Only the small, persistent glow of a question remains, gentle enough for sleep. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps the oldest records are not meant to end the mystery, but to keep it warm until another mind finds it. Perhaps every age receives the same light and gives it a different name. The Sumerian scribe calls it divine order. The physicist calls it momentum. The storyteller calls it a path through darkness. You, drifting now, may call it whatever lets the night become calm. Let the number fade. Let the clay rest. Let the river carry away the last sharp edges of thought. The ancient world does not disappear. It only recedes, like a shoreline seen through mist, still present, still waiting, still touched by a brightness too delicate to hold. And perhaps the story is not yet complete.